Let me show you this story from CNN. I want to talk about this Tucker Carlson thing. Tucker Carlson sent a racist text to a producer, quote, "It's not how white men fight." Silly. You have this story, what's his name? Abby something Grossman is her name, I guess?
Grossberg.
Grossberg, there you go. And she was coming out being like, oh, they were so bad to me. They were so awful. So what happens is Tucker Carlson releases a text where he says, I saw this video of Proud Boys beating up an Antifa guy, and I started getting into it, saying I could taste it. And then I realized, I shouldn't be thinking these things. This is bad. I don't want to be in this place. Here's what CNN does. They show the first part of the quote that makes it look like Tucker is just bloodthirsty. They then give you this massive story about Fox and Dominion and text messages and a lawsuit and settlement before they give you the actual quote, which is Tucker saying, these are bad things. We shouldn't think these things. And that's my point. Because what happens is people will read the first quote. Once they get down to the part about Dominion, old news from a month ago, they'll just stop reading. I think about this person, Abby Grossberg, and this is what this nation has raised people to be. Mindless self-indulgence. They see that you can be popular by saying whatever the machine wants you to say. They are quite literally slaves to the AI already. If they can get likes from it, they'll say it. They don't care what it is. If they don't get likes from it, they won't say it, even if it's right.
Like an episode of Black Mirror.
Absolutely. And so now what you have is a generation of people who are like, don't know, don't care. I will say whatever gets traffic. And there's this really funny clip. Actually, let me pull it up because I have it. And it's from Tim Dillon's podcast that perfectly exemplifies the vapid, despicable nature of these young people. Here we go. I'm going to pull this up right here. Let me play this clip for you guys.
To be honest, like it's actually really hard in this space, right? Like we have like 45 seconds to record a video, keep people's attention. And a lot of the people on our side, like if they start hearing, like I've actually done it before. I've criticized like Democrats, like specifically Hakeem Jeffries, and it all just went south. Like I started losing followers. Like it's bad, right? And I really want to be that person that like reaches the other side because Democrats, I mean, they're horrible at their jobs, right? They do a lot of shitty things, although I'll vote for them all the time. But it's also hard in the space to criticize them.
That's a good, can we clip that quote? They're horrible
please
at their
don't.
jobs.
Please don't clip that. Please, no, please. To be honest, like
he legit was like, no, please don't clip that, please. And when I first heard this kid said that, I thought it was him more snarkily, be like, don't clip it, come on, guys. But he actually sounds scared. And this is it. These two young men, they're paid by a talent agency that gets money from the DNC. They go on the internet and just say mindless, vapid, garbled nonsense that sounds like politics, but has no bearing in reality. They get followers from it. If they deviate from that line, they lose followers. We can have Luke Rudkowski come on this show and rant about how he doesn't like Donald Trump, and people still like and follow Luke Rudkowski. Because whatever space we're in, we're more interested in having an honest conversation and explaining our ideas, even if it challenges my or someone else's opinion. People will still be like, well, I want to hear what these people think and why. That whole thing is a cult. And this is what young people are being raised to do. It doesn't matter what Tucker Carlson was actually trying to say. What matters is how can we extract cult responses? How can we extract followers? Zombies. I don't see how the United States remains a dominant power, if it even still is, if half or more of this country are either lazy, ignorant, willfully ignorant, or willfully manipulative like these young men.
Even 30%. Are you about to say something?
I personally recoil from generational disparagement.
It's because you have children and you want to believe they can take the future back.
No, my kids are irretrievable. No, only because, we could talk about kind of Pajama Guy. I don't know if you remember that. It was from maybe it was the Obama era. And there were ads that were created to promote Obamacare. And one of them showed this sort of effete-looking guy in his pajamas, and he was dressed in red flannel pajamas, and he had a little cup of Java, and he had sort of horn-rimmed glasses.
Yeah. Yes, I think we talked about this.
Okay,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, we pulled this up recently.
So it might be tempting to sort of to write off the current generation of young people as Pajama Guy, or they're just completely wrapped up in their artificial cocoon of their phones and social media and everything else. But just getting older, I recognize that these are glib distinctions to say that one generation had grit and
They did.
understood, and this generation doesn't.
And that's a fact, though.
Yeah, never be the guy that's like, kids today.
You can't compare any of the generations since World War II.
Well, the kids that were growing up in the internet, you brought this up before the show, the kids that were born into the age of the internet don't have the reference of knowing what it's like without the machine.
It's one thing.
Sometimes.
It's one thing to say when the boomers, when the greatest generation is talking about the boomers, and you're like, don't criticize the younger generation. Everybody does it. There's that quote from Socrates about how they got no respect. And then after several generations, you've come to the point where Gen Z is morbidly obese, lazy, demanding safe spaces full of cotton candy because people said naughty words on campus. And you compare that to the greatest generation who stormed the beaches of Normandy.
But again, how many members of this current generation that we're so quick to dismiss are the heroes who are responding at school shootings, or are in the military and doing extraordinary things, who are
We're missing our recruitment goals, and the Uvalde cops did nothing, and the cops and the security guard in Parkland ran away. So now what we're seeing is there was a story in Philadelphia where a man raped a woman on the train, and not a single person did anything to help. That's where we are with our current generation.
Does the name Kitty Genovese ring a bell?
Negative.
Has anyone heard of Kitty Genovese? Mm-hmm. So Kitty Genovese was a woman in Queens in 1964, and she lived in a big apartment building that had a central courtyard area. And she was attacked and raped repeatedly and killed. And she died from her injuries. And the investigation, this is 1964, which, as far as I'm concerned, is modernity. And the investigation determined that there were several dozen people who were aware of the attack, who were witnessing it take place, or different parts of it take place. Not one single person called the police. And the Kitty Genovese case endures as a model of urban sociology. It's been taught for 50 years in college courses. And what was the reason that nobody called the cops? And as opposed to your example on a subway where nobody lifted a finger, you're right there in the thick of it. You might be afraid that you're going to get slashed or whatever. Here was a situation where these several dozen people in this apartment complex looking down on their courtyard didn't even face the hurdle of personal exposure to danger, right? They just had to pick up a phone, and nobody did. And why didn't they?
I bet I know, because they all thought somebody else was going to do it.
Correct. Okay,
Yeah, well,
so, when you cite an example like that one on the subway as an example of today's morality, depraved morality on the part of a given generation, then we can talk about Kitty Genovese from 1964, which was a generation by and large with much greater civic sense.
Yes. But I'm saying it just has gotten worse. Like, I'm not comparing those people to the people who stormed the beaches of Normandy. I absolutely agree that generations have increasingly gotten worse. Now, what we're dealing with there is two singular stories that it's the plural of anecdote is not data. We have these stories. They're interesting. But I think when you look at what's happening with our universities, you take a look at the fact that movies, they're firing, they fired Sarah Silverman, I think. She got fired from a movie because she did a blackface joke 15 years prior, mocking the idea. We're in a generation now where you have college students screaming at professors that this is not about education, it's about safe spaces.
Look, there's a lot of troubling phenomena out there with the current generation. All I'm saying is that if I were on that day where I have this supernumerary Reese's peanut butter cup that I just shouldn't, right, and I plop to the ground, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a person of the current generation who's going to get me to a hospital and who's going to take care of me.
But again, anecdotal.
But I think it's important.
But so is your subway story.
And I said that. I said quite literally, your story and mine are anecdotal.
But I'm willing to step back and say, let's multiply it by millions. So I don't make blanket statements about generations.
So let's do that. Let's talk about. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that if a woman is 9 months pregnant and at the point of birth, a doctor should be allowed to kill the baby?
So you're asking about my personal political opinions, which I'm not supposed to give because I'm a reporter.
So let's just put it this way. You don't have to answer that question.
Okay.
In Colorado, a woman can be at the point of birth, and a doctor can kill the kid. The Democrats tried passing a law allowing basically limitless abortion for the health of the mother. And there was interesting ways they described what that really meant. It could mean depression and things like that. We went into great detail. We're at a point now where our standard, and using abortion as one single example, you have states that have said no limit. You have states that have banned it outright. A complete hyperpolarization of morality in this country. You have people, you have states that are advocating for child sterilization with sex change surgery, despite the fact that the universities and medical practice in Europe have already abandoned it. They don't care about what makes sense. I think it is not that I'm saying that we're going to lose, but there is a very clear moral decay in this country with the current generation that didn't exist with the previous generation.
And now, again, I'm not giving any of my own opinions because I'm not paid to do so, although I'm willing to explore those options with Timcast. But here you are talking about moral decay, and the person who you have identified just in the course of our conversation as the only person who can possibly start the great rescue effort of the United States that urgently needs to be undertaken is Donald Trump.
That's right.
Okay, who is married 3 times.
Yep.
Under indictment, presently facing on rape trial.
Fake rape trial.
But
that's quite literally the moral decay to which I'm referring. A 30-year-old case that clearly appears to be fabricated, a false accusation that he was working for Russia, Ukraine Gate, clearly something Joe Biden was doing, engaging in a quid pro quo, and our morally decayed country indicted Trump for figuring it out rather accidentally. Trump is not a saint. He's a lewd, lascivious old man. And it's scary that he is our best chance. But when you talk, you don't think
maybe politically, but I think it's in the music industry.
Oh, come on, he's in the bus saying you can grab the women, they let you do it, whatever. I'm not going to come out and be like, what the left is saying about him. He said they let you, fine, whatever. But it is fairly, locker room talk, whatever you want to call it. Trump is not a saint, but Trump is at the very least someone who's, I would say, our only chance at getting rid of the first layer of crust that has taken over our
and all the other
system.
Potential Republican contenders whose names we all know, you regard as hopelessly corrupt?
Well, like who?
DeSantis.
DeSantis, I think, is good. That's why I said a Trump DeSantis ticket is probably pretty good. I think it is a good job, but I think DeSantis is going to negotiate. And what that will do is just be another sludge in the machine of slowly moving forward, whereas Trump's going to go in like a bull in a china shop and just start saying, enough, but I'm done with this.
We need the groundswell because the head does nothing without the body's attention. And so the people, the generation, I think this is why it's interesting you brought up, don't demonize generations of humans because every generation faces its own its own coming to God moment, its own struggle and overcoming of it. And this generation is facing it, and a lot of them are failing. They've been sucked into the machine and have become something they're not, or that they weren't, or that they don't want to be, or that they don't understand. But there's a lot of great ones. And we're speaking to all of them, especially the ones that are listening right now. Like, I don't know what 30-40% of our audience is between the ages of 18 and 34. Like, we've got a lot of you listening right now, and it is you that is going to change the world and hold this thing together.
What I'm saying is not that every single person that exists is bad. I'm saying that millennials have a very serious malignancy, and so does Gen Z, something that we've not seen in the past. In the 1990s, I grew up in Chicago as a Democrat, as Democrat could be, and I worked at a bunch of nonprofits. When I got older, I did register vote actions, and I thought I liked Obama until he started blowing up kids, and obviously the stuff he did to you was really bad. But that was what my family believed in. And when it came to abortion as a really good moral example, the argument that I would hear from my urban liberal Democrat friends was, no, none of us like it. We all think abortion is bad, but it's not an issue for government. It's an issue of medical practice. So we agree at a certain point, maybe it should not be allowed, but the government shouldn't intervene within a certain amount of time. Now the argument is that that female comedian going on Netflix saying, everybody get an abortion, you get an abortion. You have Lena Dunham going out and saying she wished she had one despite not being pregnant. She's like, I never got one, but I wish I did. That is absolute chaos and moral decay that didn't exist in the previous generation. And we're seeing that get crazier and crazier to the point where Washington and Colorado are creating sanctuaries for child sex changes. Like, it's just, come on. In Sweden, Finland, Denmark, they say, okay, we're going to stop doing these things that don't work. The Tavistock Center in the UK is being shut down. In the United States, the Democrats are codifying law to take 10-year-olds and give them hormones that sterilize them. And I'm just like, okay, the thirst for power and money knows no bounds. The doctor in Florida who made videos saying she was going to yeet teats today and talked about You know, she makes tons of money giving young girls double mastectomies because they're going through some kind of psychological trauma. This is moral decay that did not exist. Now, don't get me wrong, lobotomies happened. And then everybody was like, yo, these are bad things. We stopped doing it. But today, there's a bifurcation. It feels like the traditional left and right paradigm is in one camp, and then this new morally psychotic algorithmic mess is the left.
Yeah, it's the first time that the international community has heavily influenced the United States like this.
I think the hardest thing is you don't want to demonize a whole generation. I think you're right. But on the other hand, we have to be honest about the challenges that they're facing. And the way that the generations before them have prepared them to take on the world is not serving them.
You're part of this generation. You should say we, not they.
I mean,
I'm talking about millennials. I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
I think millennials are garbage. I think they're...
No, you guys are awesome, man.
Millennials are over... Millennials are the... Look, Gen X is fantastic. I think Gen X is great.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Gen X
Thank you.
and boomers...
And I am willing to praise whole generations.
oh, okay. So it works one way, but not the other.
Pretty awesome.
But here's how I view it. You have Gen Xers, which are net positive, but maybe it's 60-40. There's a decent amount of people in their 40s and 50s who are very weak and allow this kind of stuff to take over. You then get the millennial generation, which inverts, where very few millennials are of strong moral character and overwhelmingly are vapid, narcissistic, social media driven individuals. Gen Z actually might be slightly more based than millennials because we're starting to see a bunch of young people protest the algorithmic psychosis that millennials were entrenched in. So I think that may be a net positive, but Gen Z is still fairly even. Gen Z is better than millennials, I think, but millennials are, and I'm a millennial, I think millennials are the worst.
Well, the thing I like about Z and millennials is that they're involved. The problem with Gen X, and I'm not speaking for everybody, because obviously, James, you and I are X, I'm like tail end of it, you're earlier or in the middle of it somewhere, is that they checked out. A lot of Gen X is just checked out.
Well, the name of the movie was Slackers, right? I mean, that was one of the sort of iconic movies from the Gen X period. We were talking about this before we started the show. And yeah, I was born in 1968. So I turned 10 in the year 1978. You know, where an evening's entertainment was you watch TV, one of the 3 channels. Maybe you had a VHS machine, but you played board games. You know what I'm saying? And like there were times of the day that were set aside, generally the morning and 6 p.m. And in those times, if you wanted to be engaged in the business of acquiring information, those were the times when you did that. Otherwise, you were living your life. And I'm very grateful to have experienced a time before computers took over everything.
Mm-hmm. So what I see with the boomers, for instance, is that we had a lot of great content in the 90s. Having grown up in the 90s, I'm biased for sure. And
the Gin Blossoms.
Oh my God!
But
what a great band.
I think
Allison Road, man.
I think about where we are culturally today. And especially with AI and algorithms and what that's leading to, it's static, it's chaos, and where we were in the 90s and before that, and it just feels like an unraveling, you know?
That is certainly, I feel like, an attack, a psychological attack by foreign interests, corporate interests, to try and disrupt the people of the United States. It's not a natural thing that just happened because these people are who they are.
I think it's just a result of the internet, right? I mean, exactly to your point, there was limited connection to the outside world. You got information at certain times. Otherwise, you were more engaged with your family life and your community. I don't think when we had the internet, which of course is a great blessing in a lot of ways, we knew what it was like. We didn't know we'd have to put it back in the box, right? We didn't know that at some point you would hand a 12-year-old a smartphone and say like, okay, be careful on this. You could get semi-addicted to it and be constantly seeking dopamine hits through people online. We didn't know what we were bringing up. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about the challenges that specifically face the youngest generations in this country because they're unlike any generation before them.
We're hearing that crazy story about Roblox. Do you guys hear about this one?
No, tell me.
Predators are going on Roblox because they know there's no parents and it's all kids. And then they start indoctrinating these kids and saying creepy things to them and exploiting them. And that's...
But I think that also happened on do you remember RuneScape?
Yeah.
My brother used to play that and like you would get people being like, oh, let me give you your phone number or whatever else. Like these again, very morally corrupt people will find a way to use technology that we think is innocent for negative and nefarious means.
And this is what we're seeing with Drag Queen Story Hour, is it's gotten to the point where the left establishment is protecting the exploitation of children to rather extreme degrees. Like the sterilization of children. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.